Welcome to Economics Happy Hour. Brief introduction before we get to our main episode. This was recorded at 16 Lots Brewery in Newport, Kentucky. So there's a little bit more background noise than usual, but we thought it was a little bit of a special event. We hope you like it. Let's get to the episode.
Welcome to Economics Happy Hour. My name's Matt.
And I'm Jadrian.
And we are here today, live on location with Mary Clare Peate. Am I getting the pronunciation right? Sorry.
Yes. Rhymes with feet.
That's one that we should get. That's one that we should get.
You were bullied a lot as a child you rhyme with feet. Mary Clare Peate is what they...
I never got that.
Never, okay.
No, okay. If that's the thing somebody gets bullied over, I'm like, I'm doing okay if that was the case. But this two firsts for us. One, it's our first live guest, and it's our first live time together. Instead of doing it via Zoom.
We're not on Zoom. We are at an actual brewery in front of each other. So if you watch on YouTube, you can actually see all three of us sitting right beside each other. Probably not looking at the camera. We're all going to just look at each other. We're not going to look at... This will be the worst YouTube video ever. They're going to watch people looking at each other.
Charlotte will make it magic. And our listeners know we like to start every episode by, what are you drinking?
Yep. We should start with our guest first.
Yeah.
I'm drinking a Diet Coke.
Very, very fancy. It is the afternoon, so that is understandable. Jadrian, which one do you have?
So I'm going first. So Matt and I we'll say we're splitting a flight, but we're not. We have half pours.
Yeah.
So I have a Brother Hubbard Berliner Weiss. So I went with my favorite sour beer of choice.
Perfect. I went with the Soap City IPA. Once again, 16 Lots Brewery. They were kind enough to let us come here, so other than that, they're not really sponsoring us. But
we'll tag them in some stuff.
Yeah. But
here we go.
Cheers.
There we go. I hope that clink worked out. Like Charlotte will be able to take that clink and make that like the opening. We could put that on all the future Zoom ones. We'll just add this little clink noise.
That could be good. So we are at the start of the Jet Set conference. That's why we're all here. Jadrian, are you both on the board?
We are. We're both directors of the Journal of Economics Teaching.
So Mary Clare, why don't we let you explain Jet Set and what this is and a little bit about the Journal of Economics Teaching.
Wonderful. Well, before I begin, I have to say that my views are my views alone and not those of the Federal Reserve, Board, or Bank. So with that, the Jet Set Conference, Journal of Economics Teaching Conference, happens once a year. And it's what we like to say, it's a different conference, and it's a different conference in that it's a small, intimate crowd of passionate economics educators from the high school and collegiate space, teaching things that you can do and deploy in your classroom tomorrow.
I think that's good. No, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a bunch of econ nerds who all come together to talk about economics. We try to talk about other things, and then
we fail.
7 minutes later, we're talking about something we're doing in class. So
that's sounds like our podcast.
Yeah, right? we have about 8 minutes of beer talk, and then it turns into let's talk about economics. So we probably should introduce Mary Clare, since she had to give her Fed speech. We should probably say where she's from.
Putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, as people might have guessed, Mary Clare Peate is Senior Economic Education Specialist at the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. Do you know your bio by heart that I'm reading? Could you just read them? Where she develops economics content, including lessons, online, learning modules, videos, and interactives. Prior to joining the Federal Reserve, she was the director of curriculum at Marginal Revolution University at George Mason University and has held several other education-related roles. We got to meet when she came to the Susquehanna University campus. I believe it was talking to teachers that day.
Right. Educators,
We have a Center for Economics Education. Jadrian's also talked there as well. And thrilled that you're here. So what we thought with these is there's a couple big, broad questions we were curious about. One is very specific to your role, and one is a little... Why don't we do the specific to the role?
Okay.
So
we also might change our minds and ask you other questions. So
you are at
there's no script.
You are at, we're academic economists, and I think most of our listeners understand what an academic economist does, right? Go in, teach, research, there's some service. you're at the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, and what? I want to know a little bit about what your role is, why that route, and a little bit about the route and the decision to be at the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis.
Yeah, thank you. I will try to be succinct rather than telling my whole journey of what I got to be there. But really, I have always been so passionate about education just in general, and so that's how I, when I was in my youth, I just cared about education, educating. I thought it was so important, and it was so important to my sort of development, etc. But
today is International Beer Day. That's the
the reason to interrupt.
I was not trying to interrupt, but it's International Beer Day.
This just in. All right. So I've always been really passionate about education, and it was so important to my own life that I wanted to share that with others. And so I did Teach for America. And so taught there before going on. So, but basically it was fell in love with education first, and then when I went to college, I fell in love with economics. And so basically my career has been sort of ping-ponging between those two, and it wasn't until my role at MRU that I realized, hey, you know what, actually I could just combine these two into an economics education role. And so at that point, honestly, it was when I started to seriously consider doing something in that space, and the MRU position opened up. Honestly, I was getting my PhD with, and was taking a class with Tyler Cowen, who is the founder of MRU. Yep. And I remember speaking to him, and he sort of was asking me what I wanted to do, and I sort of said, I want to work for MRU. And so anyways, that's how it started, and I've been in economic education ever since. And so now my current role at the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis is just wonderful in the sense that many of the banks have an economic education or personal finance mission to educate the populace, and so they just create a wealth of materials. They're doing tons of outreach, etc. And so what's so wonderful about it with the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank is we're sort of co-located with Fred, if you're familiar with the Fred graphs, and so that team and a wealth of knowledge there, and then the research division at the Federal Reserve Bank. So they review some of the materials that we produce, etc. So anyways, it's just a great place to work.
Fantastic. So MRU is affiliated with George Mason, but it's not really George. Is it a little bit more private?
No. It's a nonprofit.
It's a nonprofit. Was there a big shift going from a nonprofit at MRU to going to the federal government? Because you are literally now a federal government employee. Is that correct?
The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis is a nonprofit.
It's a nonprofit?
Yes, the banks are nonprofits.
Yeah. Okay.
The Federal Reserve Board, I believe, is government.
Okay. I learned something new today. I did not know that.
Interesting. Okay. But you are still... So you're not a government employee?
Not a government employee.
Okay. Is all of the... Wait. I have so many questions now. I have like follow-up questions. Okay, interesting. I'm going to have to look more into this, I think. I'm going to have to learn more. I just assumed it was all connected, but now that I think about it, I don't, like, if my students go work as like an RA or something, it's a very different, like, application process, background process, like, compared to if I have a student who goes and does, like, Department of Homeland Security or goes and works at the Treasury and stuff.
Right.
Interesting.
I'm just hoping I didn't tell students the wrong thing. You've been the past 15 years. That's okay. Yeah, that's fascinating.
This could be an entry in our future book of lies my econ teacher told me.
Yeah, that's about it. No,
it's actually Matt. That'll be the opening chapter. Is Matt can say, "I've been lying to my students for 15 years."
There've been a couple others that have screwed up. So this is probably not as big. If I haven't
all
screwed it up.
educators, have made these
We all make
mistakes.
mistakes.
Okay.
Exactly.
So speaking of all educators make mistakes, Mary Clare, then what mistake have you made that you're willing to?
This is bull.
I know. It could be not when you're at the Fed, but at George Mason. Have you like said something in class where like later you're like, that was wrong? I completely did that one wrong.
Sure, all the time. I'm not necessarily, no. I mean, we're all human, and somebody told me that the year that you actually learn economics is your first year teaching.
Okay.
Right. That's the way.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. No, in terms of understanding
Yeah.
the basics, you
Right.
really get it that first year
So
teaching.
I
think that's
get,
true.
mine was the first time I taught principles of micro. I was teaching the international trade tariffs graphs with the little triangles, I love it. It's a great
Yes.
graph. I absolutely love it. I know there's people who hate that. I love the two little dead weight loss triangle tariff things. But a student once asked me what I could explain what one of the triangles means. I was like, oh yeah, that's people who aren't buying as much stuff because the prices are higher. They go, well, what's the interpretation of that other triangle? And I go, well, I don't know. It's a dead weight loss triangle. I had no idea. I just always memorized
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know. Nobody's ever asked me what that other triangle means. But I
Yeah.
am comfortable now. It is efficiency loss, by the way. Those of you listening who are also curious,
Those of
it
you
is
following along at home.
it is efficiency loss from having a more expensive
Yeah.
producer produce the item rather than a cheap overseas producer.
When I speak biggest screw up in terms of like I had to go back and tell the students I screwed up. I was a TA, and I went through an example, and I just screwed it up.
Yeah.
I mean, I completely gave the wrong answer, and I had no idea where I was, and I had to go back and solve it on my own and come back. And
I know.
the professor was really laid back. He goes, "Oh, yeah, you'll go in and eat a little crow. It's no biggie." And he laughed about it, and I'm like, "Okay, that's the better attitude. I'd rather have them have that attitude than otherwise." So,
Yeah.
So the other question, and
this
we
is a
have
nice
done
tie-in,
this-
though. This is a nice tie-in, right? In terms of the next
favorite.
question.
Yeah, and we have both done episodes actually on this, so we're excited. Part of what we're doing today and meeting with people is asking, what is your favorite economics topic to teach?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I thought about this for a while because, I think there's a lot of classic answers, the classics, incentives or marginal thinking or something.
Our peanut gallery is listening because they have to come up with a different answer. So you have the perk of giving the first answer.
Well, so I thought I was I'm gonna zag.
Supply and demand. It's gonna be something like real basic.
No, so
It's okay.
I love monopolistic competition.
That's a good
Very,
one.
very cool.
I love that
Okay.
topic.
And the reason it's sort of maybe it's, I don't know if it's selfish or I don't know what the word is exactly, but when I was learning economics as an undergrad, we learned perfect competition. We learned, let's use the novel example of gas. Woo! Or maybe we'll use a widget. And so you're memorizing perfect competition graphs, etc. And then and it's completely divorced from the world you live and breathe in. And you're walking around and not to say there are obviously goods and services that approximate that. I'm not trying to belittle it, and it's very important, and we understand why we teach it. But then suddenly stumbling upon monopolistic competition and thinking, oh, this is it. Okay, this is the thing.
Right now, we are sitting in a monopolistically competitive
Correct,
market, right?
correct.
This is a brewery. There's a whole bunch of them within
Right.
a 10-minute walk of where we're sitting.
Yeah.
But this one's a little bit different. And, they allowed us to
They let us
record.
They let us
Yeah.
which
is
we
the
love.
only
That's
one.
16 Lots Brewery in Cincinnati.
Yes.
That's,
Actually, technically, it's Newport.
Newport,
We're actually
Newport,
in
yeah.
Kentucky. So.
Yes.
So I'm glad you said that. That's actually I have the exact same experience. That's how I fell in love with economics. Was taking principles. You go through perfect competition, and the instructor says, there's not a lot of these that are real.
Yeah.
And then you do Monopoly, and you're like, there's not a lot of these that are real.
Exactly.
And then they do monopolistic competition, and like the way that they presented it to us was, is there something, and this is the way I teach it to my students, is there something in your hometown, some industry that you seem year over year, there's some of these that open and then some of them that close. There's a new restaurant that goes in and then a year later it closes. And a gas station goes in and a gas station closes. And I was sitting there going, holy crap, that's my hometown. We were like a commuter suitcase town that had tons of fast food, tons of banks, and tons of gas stations. Because it was just people going to work in the other city. And I was always so confused as like a student in high school and middle school, because I was like, why do we have another bank? Why do we have another gas station? And like that other one, that bank just closed. Why is there another? Like I was seeing it, but I had no explanation for it until the monopolistic competition chapter. And they're like, it's just that demand curve sort of moving around the cost curve of entering and exiting.
And I guess taking half a step back, I'm guessing many of our listeners will know what this is, but a monopoly, I think everybody knows a monopoly. There's one firm. They control everything. Perfect competition has some pretty unrealistic assumptions that you were laughing
They have
about,
a
right?
few, most of them are unrealistic.
So every seller is perfectly identical. There's perfect information, and there are many sellers, so that
And many
nobody,
buyers.
many buyers, and so nobody has a big market share at all.
No transaction costs.
No transaction costs.
Like-
And monopolistic competition, the other thing, easy entry and exit into the market.
Yeah.
Monopolistic competition, that holds. Easy entry and exit into the market.
Right.
And there are many small sellers,
Right.
but the products now are differentiated.
Right, exactly.
And just like this has a different ambiance, this is, I think, their crafted beer, which is pretty delicious. So, Diet Coke, I'm sure, is just as good too.
Matt does love Diet Coke, so that might be a later one.
I've had Diet Cokes.
So actually, when I teach monopolistic competition, I go through the boring, like I think, I enjoy teaching market structures, but I go through sort of the more boring one. And then it flips over when I'm now starting monopolistic competition, and I have this graph that has 5 pictures of chicken nuggets on it, but without the brand names on it. And they kind of stare at it for a second, and I go, I'm going to show you something really gross. Most of you in here can identify these chicken nuggets without a brand
Wow.
on it. And immediately, like, somebody will raise
That's
their hand, they're like, A is Chick-fil-A, B is McDonald's, C is Burger King. I'm like, I want you to really think of how weird that is, that you can recognize a chicken nugget without
funny.
its labeling. And I go, that's monopolistic competition. Like,
That's a great
they're
example.
they're differentiated,
That's
and
Yeah.
you know it. I go, they're all chicken nugget. I go, 2 chapters ago, it's just chicken nuggets.
Yep.
All sellers of chicken, you shouldn't care.
Yeah.
But they get a kick out of it, because the one that's hard for is the Sonic chicken nuggets. They don't know what those look like. So there's always one chicken nugget I put up there that they,
I don't know what
they
The
don't
detractor.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, like a spoiler.
they guess a
That's
lot.
good.
And I'm like, nope, you're wrong.
So one thing we also do, and then on every every one of these, and I'm happy to start, or I know Jadrian can start too. I'd love to start on this one because your
Okay.
topic makes me smile. Is we try to, what is a pop culture reference? And it doesn't have to tie into monopolistic competition by any means. If it does, there's bonus points. I get bonus points too.
No, I've got one I've got the one I use. So
But
I'm ready.
So if you have one and you're like, I want to be first, I don't want to deprive you of being
No.
first. Okay.
No,
Um,
please.
So well, 1 week ago today, actually,
Yes.
on my YouTube channel, I put an episode. I'm in the middle of. By the time this comes out, it's probably over. But they're there. Economic lessons from the TV show Cheers. And so last week, it was discussing monopolistic competition and Cheers versus the big competitor, their big rival, which was Gary's Old Town Tavern. And it's discussing how they're different. And Cheers has Mayday Malone, who's a Red Sox pitcher, which would be which would be part of how that is differentiated.
Yes, for sure.
And you know, the locations itself are different. One might be closer, the ambiance, all of the little things that make the bar different. And of course, these bars were huge rivals against each other. That's part of the TV show. So you mentioning that, and I just think it's kind of fun that Cheers.
Great.
Had something that was a pretty nice example of a monopolistically competitive firm.
Yes.
Do you have your idea? You want me to go? She's like buying time. She's like,
And it doesn't have to be monopolistic competition by any means.
you can share whatever you want with our audience of
Yeah.
dozens. Until this becomes famous and
think
people start listening to the old ones.
Yeah.
I think we can now say hundreds. We're over 300 on Substack.
Yeah, that's true.
And
Dude,
we're
now
very
you're making her nervous.
And we're really popular in Indonesia. So shout out to every Indonesian who listens. This is awesome.
So mine is also food related, TV related. It's from the TV show Superior Donuts. Have you ever seen that? I don't think it was on TV for very long. It was essentially the story of a guy who owned a donut shop in Chicago. Like, that's the whole shtick, at least from the episodes I watched. But there's one scene that I show in class. It's a rundown donut shop. He's struggling to make it. Rents are going up. Neighborhood's gentrifying. A woman comes in, orders a donut. She's like, "Oh, I'm new here. This is great. I love it." And they're like, "Yeah, this is a great place. Like, we have people who, like, the quitters from Weight Watchers are here, and the people buying drugs down the street." Like, they talk about all these different people who are buying donuts, and she goes, "Oh, great, I'll see you around." And then the montage sort of happens, and she rolls up in a food truck and parks right in front of the donut shop, and he comes out running, and he's like, "You can't park here. What are you doing?"
That's great.
And she goes, "Oh, you're right." And she puts her little quarter in. She goes, "Now I can park here." And he's like, "You're taking my business." And so she has a food truck that sells like health food and stuff. She goes, "We're not in the same business. You're catering to people who have low self-esteem. I'm catering to people who like care about their health. They're two different people." And so like they're fighting over the market. And she's like, "You said this was a great location." But I love to do it because I talk about they're attracting different markets. I really like food trucks for easy entry and exit, where I'm like, look, she can literally drive up. If it's not good, she can drive away. So I usually use that, like food trucks as like the extreme example of monopolistic competition because it hits the easy entry exit versus like a store you have to shut it down and stuff like that. That's mine.
So yeah, now's the part in the conversation where 3 hours from now I'm going to come up with a great example of monopolistic competition pop culture, but I do have a pop culture reference.
You can come back. You can leave a comment on the Substack. Make sure you could save it for 2 weeks. If you come up with one in 3 hours, save it for 2 weeks.
But Barbie's in the air.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we at the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank actually created
I think I saw this
several years ago, actually, before it was cool, a lesson plan on women's labor force participation and how it sort of tracks Barbie's occupations over
interesting.
time. So when Barbie debuts as a vet, is this a leading or lagging indicator of women's force participation?
Yeah.
And how,
Yeah.
but it really sort of tracks that progression of, okay, women were primarily teachers and nurses, and then suddenly we start to enter into other professions and
That's really
larger
cool.
numbers.
That's very cool.
I saw the tweet about Barbie, but I assumed it was about the Barbie movie, so I didn't open it. I was like, I don't need to see more stuff about this. Now I'm going to have to go back and actually look at this.
Have you both seen the Barbie movie?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
It's really got some funny moments.
It's okay.
I mean, there are some
Did you do
things in there-
Barbenheimer? Did you do both?
We did not do both, but my kids made me dress up as Ken,
Okay.
which
Really?
which Brian O'Rourke is laughing at that. Well, I mean, it's as much as I could with my
Did you have a
wardrobe.
pink polo and a...
They made me. I had like pink shorts.
There's pictures of
and I
this,
had,
which
like,
means
a
it-
Evidence?
There
It's
needs
not
to be
that
pictures
much.
on
It's
this.
a pink short, and then it's a shirt with a white shirt underneath, and
Okay.
then the unbuttoned shirt look. That
great.
was my kids saying that was as close to Ken as I was gonna get.
That's
But
great.
The picture's somewhere. It may or may not go on the video. I'm not sure. I might have to look at how embarrassing that photo is before it goes on.
It would incentivize people to start watching the YouTube version of our
That
show
would.
instead.
That would. So, well,
Really quickly, actually, I can ask you both. When did Barbie debut as a veterinarian?
when did Barbie debut as a veterinarian?
Yes.
I will guess 1984.
No, it's got to be earlier. I'm going to go 72.
85.
Wow.
You were
Okay.
really close.
spot on.
Without going over.
Without going over the Price is Right rules. Yeah. I don't know.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways.
She does not seem as progressive as I thought. I thought it was going to be...
Well, she started in like 58 or 59.
Yeah.
59.
Right? And
Oh, yeah, that's, yeah.
it was in that era. I mean, it was
Yeah.
around then. So I was just thinking, it's 25 years after. I figured I would not. Was vet wasn't the first profession.
No.
So
So I'll give you a follow-up pop culture one. Is actually I don't know if you've seen this on Netflix. It's called The Toys Who Made Us, I think is
Oh,
what it's
no.
called.
Okay.
It's a Netflix series. They did like 3 seasons. Each episode's a different toy. One of the episodes is about Barbie. I actually use a clip from that episode in my principal's class to teach 2-part tariffs in the pricing strategies.
Oh,
So it
interesting.
talks about how the doll is the fixed component, and then they
Yes.
made a ton of
Yep.
money by selling clothes. And they even talk about like the razor blade model, and that's how Barbie became like just so profitable, was because they split up the clothes from the doll and able to make extra
very
money
cool.
that way.
Very cool.
Very interesting.
Well, thank you for joining us. This is our experiment with live recording and guests. Appreciate
You
it.
won't be the last one, so
Yeah,
that
yeah.
helps, right? Like
Yes.
Any closing words of wisdom you'd like to leave the audience?
No, I just want to say thank you for inviting me. I had a great time, and I will be checking out your pop culture examples.
Thank you.
All
And,
right.
well,
Cheers our empty glass.
Cheers.
You get a refill now.
this was a good beer. Obviously, it's empty. So
Well, we had a half pour, so I think
That is true.
I think the half
That is
pour
true.
helped.
So, thank you for everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, Mary Claire.
Thank you.
Thank you.